Let's take a gander at a handful of horror films that might have slipped under your radar due to their low budget and indie temperament. Let's start binging.
Low Budget Binge is where we venture down the path less traveled and look at low budget, no budget, and sometimes international films that never get that top billing you see with the usual Hollywood fare. I'll indicate in the review down below where you can find these films along with their trailers. Here we go.
A Hard Place is new on demand and on digital platforms. It's directed by J. Horton and written by Michael J. Epstein and J. Horton. Seeking refuge after a heist, a group of criminals take shelter from the cold in an old barn. But as the pressure mounts and they begin fighting amongst themselves, the group realize they have stumbled in the middle of a long-standing feud between plant zombies that walk by day and feral humans that prey at night. J. Horton delivers a highly ambitious, practical effects-filled creature feature / heist movie. While this film was put together with a lick and a promise, the big ideas shine through. A Hard Place sports a nice cast of actors who will be recognizable to longtime horror fans. Lynn Lowry plays the leader of the crooks who stumble upon this feud and sports some secrets of her own. Felissa Rose also pops up as the clan leader of the feral people who hunt by night. These are the meatiest roles these two actresses have had in ages, and they do a good job with the parts. While the rest of the cast are younger, Lowry and Rose carry most of the acting weight. While the script is poppy and fast, there is a whole lot of overwriting going on from J. Horton and his co-writer Michael J. Epstein. Instead of saying the most common phrase, these writers choose to use thesaurus words or something cute, or sometimes they're just trying to create a whole new language. This is fine. I think they're trying to get their Tarantino on, but a little of that goes a long way, and these guys go to that well a lot. It ended up taking me out of the movie and thinking of the writing process, which is not a good thing for you to do when you're watching a movie. The practical effects are a lot of fun. The day-walking monsters wear full-body costumes threaded with all sorts of vines and branches. Even though they're seen in the full daylight, J. Horton makes them still look quite ominous with tight shots and scenes of the monsters blending in with the environment. The feral night stalkers are not vampires and not werewolves, but something in between. Again, the practical effects are evident, but fun to see used in an old-school way. By the time these two tribes of monsters clash, the carnage is quite impressive. There are many that may poo-poo this one for its lo-fi makings, but those will be missing out on a fun indie gem. This is backyard, low-budget goodness that embraces the realm of horror and tries to come up with big new ideas for the genre. Someone should give J. Horton $1 million or $2 to remake or expand on the big ideas he's come up with. It would definitely be worth every penny. The KILLGRIN is new on demand and digital platforms from Dark Sky Films. It's directed and written by Joanna Tsanis. After her boyfriend commits suicide, Miranda, played by Konstantina Mentelos, is overcome with grief and decides to take part in group therapy. Soon more people around Miranda are dying with their jaws ripped downward after a bout with debilitating depression. Miranda begins to think she's cursed by an otherworldly creature that appears only to the severely depressed and hopeless called the KILLGRIN. On the surface, the KILLGRIN is a cheap knockoff of the Smile franchise, with an unseen monster pulling the corners of its victims' mouths downward into a frown that breaks their jaw instead of making them smile. The way the creature appears as a curse to our lead, Miranda, pulling anyone close to her into its clutches is pretty much the same kind of story told in the popular Smile franchise. One can't deny the similarities, with the victims suffering gruesome deaths one after another until it catches up with the lead. Structurally and concept-wise, the KILLGRIN feels uncannily inspired to be kind and downright criminally lifted to be more precise. But what saves the KILLGRIN is the quality of the acting involved and the thorough commitment to telling a story focusing on grief, loss, and the overwhelming depression that often comes with those feelings. Lead Konstantina Mentelos does a great job of fleshing out the loss in a performance that really is better than it should be. The film takes the losses and loneliness she feels seriously, and more importantly, highlights the benefits of therapy as a method to treat these burdensome feelings. For that, the KILLGRIN gets my respect, even if the concept feels very familiar. I also like the practical effects on display throughout the KILLGRIN. While slight CG is used, the torn open jaws of the victim is a horrible way to go. even though I don't think you die right away from a ripped open jaw. But the wound signifies one giving up on life and being overwhelmed by heavy thoughts and feelings, so it's more of a physical way of showing how the KILLGRIN destroys its victims mentally. That doesn't stop the effects from looking goofy when the monster pulls the side of the victim's mouth downward in an exaggerated frown. Sure, it means their jaw is about to burst, which is gruesome as all get out, but before it does, the frowny face look is unintentionally hilarious. The KILLGRIN itself, while looking a lot like the creepy hallway woman in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, works. Yeah, I wasn't able to find a pic of it, but most of the time it appears as a giant shadow until the very end. Again, when the effects are practical, they're impressive, but they lose a step when done with the CG. The use of baby teeth, while kind of like the tooth monster from Channel Zero, still is a gruesome effect, albeit kind of out of the blue. All in all, I was impressed with the KILLGRIN once I got past the similarities to Smile. Its emotional depth and use of therapy was mature and well developed. The acting was better than average. It's a good little indie, and I don't think it needed to rip off a major motion picture to be that. The Ringmaster, aka Finale, is streaming on Tubi from Danse Macabre Films. The film was directed by Søren Juul Petersen and written by Carsten Juul Bladt, Steen Langstrup, and Søren Juul Petersen. On the night of the biggest game of the year, two female gas station attendants, Annie Bergfeld and Karen Mikkelsen, are tormented by an unseen stranger. Later, both wake up in a warehouse bound with chains and a camera pointed at them. With a group of wealthy viewers watching and paying big money, the women face the Ringmaster, played by Damon Younger, who adds flair and pomp to an online red room where torture is amplified as the show goes on. In many ways, The Ringmaster is your typical torture porn style film that got old in the aughts, which means it's practically ancient now. While there are some details that set The Ringmaster apart from the 1,000,001 Hostel ripoffs out there, a large portion of the film is basically a woman tied to a chair being tortured. Personally, I grew sick of the torture porn subgenre pretty quickly. I know the rise in torture horror began in 2001, where we were all strapped to our couches and forced to watch the Twin Towers fall. It was gruesome and horrifying, but we couldn't turn it off or look away. The fact that so many torture films feature a person bound to a chair and forced to endure pain and dismemberment shows that this was a resonant feeling, and the subgenre took a whole lot of advantage of that. I'm not judging anyone who digs that sort of film, but I just feel that since a whole generation has passed since 9/11, I'm ready to move on and hope there are better avenues for horror to go down. But the torture portion is only half the movie. The first 30 or so minutes of The Ringmaster is a pretty strong exercise in suspense and tension with the two women alone at work and someone lurking outside in the darkness. The film really does a good job of highlighting the women's vulnerability and amplifies the scares with some great sequences of delayed tension. It's a shame the film goes down the torture porn rabbit hole because the time spent outside of the Red Room are the most interesting parts of the film. I will say that despite the distasteful and extreme torture that's going on, the way the film is presented is imaginative. The film begins with a Sideshow Barker's announcement, opening the film word for word, just like James Whale's Frankenstein did. The circus references don't stop there, though, as the clown-faced Ringmaster breaks the torture into acts that builds towards a gruesome and gnarly finale. It's gross, but the addition of title cards and animation, along with a sultry voiced announcer describing each act, shows that a little thought was put into the way this torture was being presented. It's reminiscent of the Grand Guignol roots that all horror films are derived from, and puts some flair and flourish into the whole film. The Ringmaster does seem to have a message. That of cameras are everywhere these days, and you never know who's behind them. The third act is a big escape from the torture den, and our heroines struggle to get out from under the unblinking eye of the camera. The Ringmaster is better than it should be, despite the torture porn aspects. There's a little bit of production and panache going on. The Danish actors are all strong, with both women in peril, Anne Bergfeld and Karen Mikkelsen, delivering heart-wrenching and daring performances. I also liked Damon Younger's turn as the Ringmaster, as he adds more than just the giggling killer clown with some poetic words and wonderful physicality. You have to be in the right mood for this type of thing, but if you prepare yourself for some extreme horror, the Ringmaster actually delivers some solid thrills and chills. The Severed Son is new on demand from Dark Sky Films. It's directed and written by Dean Puckett. In a small religious community run by the charismatic pastor, played by Toby Stephens, his daughter Magpie, played by Emma Appleton, murders her abusive husband and blames it on an accident. Though the pastor accepts the cause of death, the rest of the community does not, labeling Magpie and her 2 sons as heretics. As the pastor deals with a crisis of faith in his daughter, a darkness known as the Beast, played by James Swanton, lurks in the woods, threatening to tear this tiny village apart. The Severed Son is another look at the extreme paranoia that rose during the time of the witch trials. While things are set during that time where anyone acting out of order or not following one distinct path of worship are branded heretics, there are no specifics as to where or when this film occurs. This gives the film a sort of timeless feeling. The Severed Son tells a simple yet haunting story of one woman pushed too far, and despite her upbringing and despite the beliefs of her family, Magpie goes her own way. But that's not to say that her way is the right thing to do. She murders her husband in the opening moments, sleeps with whomever, and I mean whomever, she wants, and seems to know the beast in the woods on a first-name basis. Have no doubt, Magpie is evil, but so are the people who make her an outcast and try to punish her. This is a very nihilistic vision where no one is without sin, so don't look for any clear good versus evil fight. Though the budget seems pretty low on this witchy, folksy horror tale, The Severed Son makes up for it with wonderful scenes of the beautiful mountain and prairie landscape. It's an interesting juxtaposition with these small disputes cast against the wide expanse of nature, and it might be saying something about how petty all of this rage and paranoia really is, compared to the grand scheme of things. The performances are strong as well. Emma Appleton steals every scene she's in. She packs a lot of power in such a small frame and stands eye to eye against the imposing Toby Stephens as the pastor. I last saw Stephens on Netflix's Lost in Space and the fantastic lo-fi sci-fi The Machine. Here he embodies a complex character in the pastor, torn between the love of his rebellious daughter and the responsibility to serve his flock of worshippers and the Word of God. Stephens definitely plays the character as pious, but also adds a humanity that usually isn't associated with this type of character. The Severed Son is a story of creeping evil that slowly encompasses an entire village. It's a slow burner, sure, but the rudimentary slime effects and nightmare-fueled full-body costume worn by James Swanton as the Beast sure do make the horror worth the wait. I love the way no shadows appear around the Beast, and it stands like a living shadow in the woods. There have been quite a few witchy stories since The Witch was released that centered around the persecution of women who think for themselves. This is yet another one to add to the list, but The Severed Son is a good one that'll definitely leave a lasting impression. The Surrender is new streaming on Shudder. It's directed and written by Julia Max. Robert, played by Vaughn Armstrong, is terminally ill and relies on his daughter Megan, played by the boys Colby Minifi, and wife Barbara, played by Kate Burton, to take care of him in his final days. When Robert passes, Megan tries to move on, but Barbara believes that she is able to resurrect him with the aid of a shaman, played by Neil Sandiland. Megan thinks her mother is simply avoiding reality, but also knows this is her way of processing the loss, so she concedes to take part in the extensive ritual. While bearing some strong similarities to the rituals that show up in the Philippou brothers' recent film Bring Her Back, The Surrender is a much more intimate look at grief and loss. Both have demons, protective circles, and rituals requiring specific steps in order to achieve a resurrection, but the perspective of both films are completely different, making The Surrender and Bring Her Back a near-perfect double feature. The Surrender zooms in close on Megan's plight, opening with her screaming in frustration and choking down a quick smoke before running back inside to help her mother with her ailing father. Right from the beginning, you know there's conflict happening here, and it's fleshed out so realistically in that first half hour. You don't realize that aside from a few weird totems that Megan finds by her father's bedside, there really is nothing supernatural going on. You would never know that this film will soon drag you kicking and screaming by the short and curlies to the dankest parts of hell. This drama is played straight, and it's all carried by actress Colby Minifi as Megan. She does a great job as the anxiety-ridden assistant to the Soups in The Boys, but here she handles a myriad of emotions, some that don't put her in the strongest of lights, but still manages to make you feel for her all the way through. Kate Burton does a great job as Barbara, a desperate woman grasping at straws to have a few more moments with her husband, but it's Minifi's Megan that really functions as the eyes and ears of the viewer, doubting what's going on, but attempting to go with the flow for the sake of those she loves. For the most part, The Surrender could be a stage play, as the bulk of it takes place within Megan and Barbara's home. I love the small scope of this film, allowing the performers to take center stage. This helps in the final half hour when all things literally go to hell as the women perform the ritual and end up within a witch's protective circle on the edge of the underworld looking for their lost father/husband. This is one of the most chilling depictions of hell I've seen in ages, maybe since Baskin or The Void, both of which sport some of my favorite hellscape depictions ever. In Surrender, hell is lonely and desolate, filled with blind souls just waiting to pull you in to join them. While this might be considered a slow burner, The Surrender ramps up the speed to breakneck, wrapping up with a solemn and poignant ending. The Surrender is a touching film about loss, but also sports some scenes of utter nightmare. It's on a much smaller scale than films like Hereditary and Bring Her Back, but deals with some of the same heavy themes. I highly recommend this heart-wrenching and spine-tingling little gem. From acting to drama to script to the depiction of hell, this is something you do not want to miss. Please do me a favor and punch that like button down below. Share this video with all of your social media addicted pals. Click subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for notifications. You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside your reality. You're